What's going on, guys? It's Danny from Slow Restoration, and as you can see, we have the 53 Chevy. Getting ready to say Ford, I don't know why. Definitely a Chevy. Our 53 Chevy flatbed. It's a 4100 chassis cab, so it's I believe it's a 1.5 ton, but we always had issues with the brakes. They didn't work, so we pulled the wheels off, pulled the drum off, which is huge, by the way. It actually measures out to be 15-inch and a 4-inch pad. So that is absolutely giant brake for the back of this thing. This side in particular was hanging up and it was very sticky. We didn't have any hydraulic at all in it. The pedal just went straight to the floor and stayed to the floor, actually. So we pulled this side off because it was the worst. Like I said, it was hanging up. It looks like someone has been in there. Looks like it does have new shoes or newer shoes on it, but this thing sat for a long time. You can see by the inside of the drum here, it's a lot of surface rust. It's got plenty of thickness on, so I think it'll clean up no problem. But if you look at the shoes themselves, you can see they're delaminating, and I think what happened is these rivets just got old, and they're a lot of times they're brass, and they'll deteriorate and fall off. I don't see it here now, but once I got the drum off, I did see a rivet laying down, and as you can see, we have some movement there, and that's probably enough to just make this thing hang up. And if, like I said, they look new, and sometimes these linings are actually too thick. You can have everything adjusted completely down and still have fitment issues. But either way, we're going to remedy that. First step in figuring all this out is to get some of this pulled apart. This is kind of an odd setup if you're not familiar with heavier duty stuff, especially older heavier duty stuff. Drum brake specifically, it actually has 2 wheel cylinders. So there's one here, there's one there, and then there's this bar. Brake line coming in the back only goes to this wheel cylinder back here. We come back here, we can see it going in, and then it comes back out, goes across, and then goes into this wheel cylinder. So as you can see, we have that backed off. Everything seems to be coming apart pretty good. We have the wheel cylinder unbolted. This little heat shield pops off. There is a part number on there. I think we have some of these parts tracked down, but we do need to get it apart and measure the bore size. So you can see that's just totally gagged up and rusted up inside. So let's go ahead, see if we can get this wheel cylinder popped out and see if we can get some of this stuff tracked down. I was able to get that out, of course. It actually came apart pretty easy. I think these have probably been replaced at one time too. You can see the backing plate's a little rustier than what this is, but again, sitting does not do these things any good at all. So chances are we're going to need everything. We're going to need 2 wheel cylinders, new shoe set, and I think the hardware set's probably good. This stuff is just giant and it still looks in good shape. But another interesting thing about this is it's 10 lug back here. It's actually only 5 lug in the front, but they use one of these stiffener plates. If we come up front here, every other hole is blocked off. So it's the same wheel, same bolt pattern, but only 5 lug instead of the 10 that's in the rear. So back to this wheel cylinder, we popped it off to check the bore size, and you can see just how gagged up this stuff is inside. It's completely rusted up. Cylinders are frozen there. So these are probably trash. You can get rebuild kits and hone and or bore these cylinders out, but if we can get a new cylinder, we'll probably just go ahead and do that. It'd be a lot quicker, and most of the times the kits to rebuild these and the work involved are more money than if you can source a whole wheel cylinder out. So, and with that rear wheel cylinder off also, it's got a banjo bolt that goes through the fitting, as you can see there. And we're going to go ahead and take these shoes off too, because No sense doing all this and have issues with the rivets popping out. So there is took the top off. There's a cotter pin, there's a castle nut, and a big washer that holds the shoe from falling out pretty much. You can see how it's held together down here. So we'll bend the cotter pin, pull the cotter pin out, back this nut off, pull the washer off, and then we just have 4 springs, 2 on each shoe, and our shoes will come. And with the back taken apart, we're gonna move back, or move further forward. Actually, my light just shut off, so we can get that back on. Oh, battery's dead. But we are now on the master cylinder. So the master cylinder is actually under the floor. There's actually a little plug, pops out, a rubber plug, so you can fill it up from inside the cab. You don't have to get under here. There's kind of a weird fitting here that looks a little crusty. We'll see if that'll come apart. We'll get that sprayed down and see if we can get that to pop loose. 2 mounting bolts and just a pin up front, a cotter pin and a pin. See if we can get the light to pop on just so you can see that. There's a pin here with a cotter pin where the lever goes in. While we're under here though, I will show you that these have a pinion brake or dry shaft brake, however you want to call it. So right off the back of the transmission, there's a big drum brake. Here's the drive shaft itself. Here's the drum brake assembly. It's manual. There's just a lever inside, but as long as your drive shaft's in and this is working, you can stop the vehicle. So I've gotten a little bit on here. I got everything sprayed down with some penetrating lube and got some wrenches and stuff on here. And it is just amazing how this stuff, it looks rusty. It looks like there's no way in the world it would break loose. And sure enough, it breaks loose and you can save everything. So I don't know what it is about this older steel, but it's not like the modern steel we have now. If it looks a little rusty now, there's no way it's coming apart. This older steel was just different. So let me keep going here, get this master cylinder off, and then what we need to do is pull this boot off and measure the bore size, because there's 2 different master cylinders for this truck. Well, there it is off. Not exactly, there's the only port, and like I said, there's a fitting that has kind of 2 fittings built into it. Not exactly what you would think would be on a truck of this size with a drum brake on the back of that size, but that's what they put on these old things. No power assist, it was all foot power. So we have that off. There's some casting numbers on there. We'll see if we can get that crossed. And we did get our springs popped off the back shoe here, so now it just pops right off, and we can try and get those matched up also. We'll get all that cleaned up a little bit. There are adjusters here that appear to be frozen. We'll try and get them popped loose. They are adjusted all the way down, so that wasn't our issue, but we'll keep moving here. Like I said, the biggest problem is going to be availability of all this. And with the lug nuts off the front wheel, again, we'll take this stiffener off. You can kind of see how it works. And with the wheel off, you can see that this drum is not a slip off. It actually bolts on, those bolts there. But to get this whole assembly off, we need to spin this cap off. You can see it's got a hex on there. I need to find something that fits that because I don't have anything quite that big right here. So we'll get that spun off, and then there's a wheel bearing assembly inside, and this whole assembly will slip off, and then we can get down and see. I'm sure we're going to need everything inside the front too, but we'll see as soon as we get this off. All right, we got our large 3/4 inch socket set here, and it appears that that's 1 7/8, or at least that was enough to get it to break loose. So that is threaded. Sorry, it got extremely windy here now, so you're probably going to get a lot of wind noise. So once we get this threaded off, we'll set that to the side, and it's kind of like your normal. It's got a normal wheel bearing. It's got a cotter pin, a castle nut, and a bearing assembly inside there. So we'll get that removed. We'll bend that excuse me, cotter pin straight, get it out of the way, back to the castle nut off, and this whole assembly should slide right off. Alright, so now it's actually, I think it's snowing and sleeting in that too, which is crazy for this time of year, but we have the castle nut off, the washer, and the inner race. And as you can see, these old bearings are actually real ball bearings, so that's part of the reason these things don't spin. They're not good for any kind of high mile per hour or anything, because they aren't a modern bearing like we're used to. So let me keep working on that. It's going to be a little bit of a ridge on the outside of this drum. I'll work at it and get it off. Might have to back the brakes off a little bit more. And with that off, you can see the front aren't near as stout as the back. They're still a large diameter, but they're only what, maybe 2.5 inch wide compared to the backs being 4. And this actually looks better up front here too, and they weren't stuck. So we'll see what we actually need. Let's look inside. That drum actually looks pretty good inside too. So I'll pull see if we can drop that down and get a better look at the ball bearings there. It's kind of a neat setup. There's the race that goes inside of that. We'll pull this rubber boot. Yeah, they're trashed. So we'll have to get these wheel cylinders off too. These are totally rusted up inside and froze up. Even if we could get them working, they would definitely leak. So these are actually bonded brake pads, so they don't look like they're deteriorating or delaminating. So we'll see. We'll check availability on them, but definitely the wheel cylinder is going to need replaced. And the hoses we really should replace them, but I just don't know if they're going to be available. So pretty simple procedure. So we're just going to pop the upper springs off, allows the shoes to relax. We can pull these pins out. We'll have to probably reuse them. We can clean them up. There's nothing wrong with them. And there's two bolts on the back side of the wheel cylinder, and of course the hose, and then we'll get that popped off, and time to go to the parts store.